To my husband's family, I was just Megan, the boring stay-at-home mom. Every Sunday dinner, they would compare me to their hero, a brilliant, famous, and philanthropic streamer they worshipped named Athena. They had no idea that after I left their house, I would go down to my basement office, put on my headset, and become Athena. They had no idea that their family's greatest disappointment and their greatest inspiration were the exact same person. And they were about to find out in the most unexpected way imaginable. The Sunday dinner at my husband's house was a weekly ritual of quiet endurance. Their home, a pristine beige-on-beige monument to suburban success, always felt like a museum to me. A museum where I was the single out-of-place exhibit. The walls were covered in professionally framed photographs of my sister-in-law, Jessica, accepting various minor sales awards, and of my husband, Sam, from his college football days. There were no pictures of me. I sat at the perfectly set dining table, pushing a piece of dry pot roast around my plate, listening to the familiar cadence of their conversation. My mother-in-law, Karen, was holding court, recounting a story about a squabble with her garden club. My husband, Sam, sat beside me, his knee gently, reassuringly pressed against mine under the table. He was my co-conspirator in these missions, my silent ally. He was the only one in his family who knew both sides of my life. My sister-in-law, Jessica, however, was not engaged in the family gossip. As usual, she was glued to her phone, a small, superior smile on her face. I knew, without looking, what she was watching. It was a video of me. Or rather, of Athena. You are not going to believe what Athena did in her charity stream last night, Jessica suddenly announced, interrupting her mother's story without a hint of apology. The table's attention immediately shifted to her. She was playing that new impossible level platformer, and for every time she died, she donated $1,000 of her own money to the Children's Hospital. She raised over $200,000 in 3 hours. She is just incredible. Oh, that's wonderful, my mother-in-law gushed. She is such a good person, a true role model. She is, Jessica agreed, her eyes still fixed on her phone. She's not just a gamer, you know. She's a genius. Yesterday, she spent 20 minutes breaking down the philosophical implications of quantum entanglement in the game's storyline. It was brilliant. She's everything a woman in the public eye should be: smart, powerful, successful, and charitable. She finally looked up from her phone, her gaze sweeping past me with complete indifference, before landing on her mother. And then she delivered the familiar, casual blow. It just shows what you can accomplish when you have real ambition, you know? She then turns to me, her smile a weapon of pure condescending pity. So, Megan, what's new and exciting in your world? Did Lily learn to tie her shoes this week? It must be so nice to have such a simple, stress-free life. The room went quiet. It was the same script, different Sunday. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jessica, the up-and-coming social media consultant for a local furniture store, was the arbiter of ambition. And I, the stay-at-home mom, was her cautionary tale. I felt Sam tense up beside me, ready to jump to my defense. I gave his knee a small, calming squeeze. "Don't," the gesture said. "It's not worth it." So I just smiled my polite, practiced, empty smile. "Yes, actually," I said, my voice even. "She's getting very good at it. I'm very proud of her." My mother-in-law, Karen, sighed, a sound of deep maternal disappointment she always reserved for me.
"That's lovely, dear," she said. "But Jessica is right. That Athena woman is a real inspiration. It just goes to show what a woman can do when she really focuses on a career instead of, other things. Some people could really learn a lesson from her." The look she gave me was not subtle. The message was clear. I was a disappointment. My life, a life dedicated to raising a kind, intelligent, and happy child, was a lesser life. It lacked spark. It lacked ambition. The irony was a physical, bitter taste in my mouth. It was a struggle not to laugh. I wanted to stand up and tell them. I wanted to say, the woman you worship, the one you hold up as the gold standard, spends her days in a basement office in a hoodie with paint stains on it, editing videos and managing a global community, all while making sure a 6-year-old eats her vegetables. The boring mom you pity and the brilliant hero you admire are the same person. But I didn't. I had kept my secret for years for a host of good reasons. I wanted to protect my daughter from the toxic, invasive nature of internet fame. I wanted to protect myself from the pressure and the expectations. I wanted to have this one normal part of my life, even if it was filled with my in-laws' quiet judgment. I had thought that was a worthy sacrifice. On the car ride home, Sam was fuming. "I can't take it anymore, Meg," he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "The way they talk about Athena and then look right through you, it's sickening, it's insane. You're more successful, more charitable, more ambitious than all of them put together. You should just tell them." "And what good would that do, Sam?" I asked quietly, watching the city lights blur past my window. They wouldn't see me. They would just see Athena, the celebrity. The dynamic would change, but it wouldn't be real. They'd just want something from me. But as I said the words, they felt hollow for the first time. The constant, weekly humiliation was beginning to take its toll. The injustice of it was becoming a weight too heavy to carry in silence. They worshipped a ghost, a carefully constructed online persona, and they dismissed the real, living, breathing person right in front of them. The disconnect was becoming a chasm, and I was beginning to feel myself falling into it. One day, I thought, looking out at the dark, sleeping suburbs, they're going to have to reconcile the two. They're going to have to see that the woman they pity and the woman they idolize are the same person. I didn't know how or when it would happen, but I knew that when it did, their small, judgmental world would never be the same again. The drive home from my in-laws' house was a quiet, tense affair. Sam's hands were white knuckles on the steering wheel, his jaw set in a hard line. I just stared out the window at the passing suburban landscape, the hurtful, condescending words of my sister-in-law and mother-in-law replaying on a relentless loop. Not everyone is built for that kind of ambition. A true role model. Some people could really learn a lesson from her. They had no idea. The sheer, staggering depth of their ignorance was almost darkly comical. Back in the safety of our own home, after we had put our daughter Lily to bed, Sam turned to me, his eyes full of a familiar, protective anger. "I can't do it anymore, Meg. I can't just sit there and let them talk to you like that. It's not right. You need to tell them."
"And say what?" I asked, a weary sigh escaping my lips. That their boring daughter-in-law, the one they think has no ambition, makes more in a month from her hobby than Jessica will make in 5 years? That their hero, Athena, is currently standing in their kitchen washing her coffee mug? It would just break their brains, Sam. And it would change nothing. They'd just find a new way to be awful. He couldn't argue with that. I gave him a tired smile, kissed him goodnight, and told him I was just going to unwind for a bit downstairs. I walked down the carpeted steps to our finished basement. The upstairs was my life as Megan. Family photos on the walls, crayon drawings on the fridge, a comfortable, lived-in chaos. The basement was another world entirely. It was my secret sanctuary, my command center.
It was the headquarters of Athena. It was a state-of-the-art streaming studio. A powerful, custom-built PC hummed quietly in its case, its internals glowing with soft blue light. 3 large, curved monitors sat on a massive desk, displaying a complex array of analytics, chat logs, and game interfaces. A professional-grade microphone on a boom arm hung like a silent sentinel beside a high-end gaming chair. On the walls behind me, out of view of the camera, were not family photos, but framed concept art from games whose development I had helped fund, signed posters from fellow streamers, and a large, beautifully framed letter from the CEO of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, thanking me for a record-breaking charity drive. This was the life they couldn't see. I sank into my gaming chair, the familiar leather creaking softly. It had all started so innocently, almost 5 years ago. Lily was just a baby. I had left my career as a software engineer to be a stay-at-home mom, and while I adored my daughter, I was slowly losing myself. The days were a monotonous loop of diapers, feedings, and nap schedules. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of our house. I was lonely. Sam, seeing the light dimming in my eyes, had been the one to suggest it. "You used to play StarCraft in college," he'd said one night. "You were a grand master, for God's sake. Why don't you play again, just to have something for yourself?" So I did. And because the isolation was the hardest part, I started streaming my gameplay on Twitch under an anonymous handle, Athena. I never used a face cam. My voice was the only thing I shared. At first, no one watched. Then a few people trickled in. They came for the high-level gameplay, but they stayed for the commentary. I didn't just play, I analyzed. I talked about game theory, about the history of the genre, about the philosophy of strategy. My small channel began to grow, attracting a community of people who were interested in more than just watching someone play a video game. The explosion happened after a clip of me went viral. I had been in a particularly intense, high-stakes tournament match and had calmly, methodically dismantled a famously toxic male player, all while delivering a quiet, scathing, and intellectually brilliant monologue on the logical fallacies of his trash talk. The clip was everywhere. Suddenly, I had tens of thousands of followers, then hundreds of thousands, then millions. Sam and I had a long, serious talk that night. The internet was a wonderful place, but it was also a dark and dangerous one. The anonymity that had started as a default had now become a necessity. We had a child to protect. We decided then and there that my identity would remain a fiercely guarded secret. Athena would be a voice, a mind, a force for good in the gaming community. But Megan would remain a quiet, private, suburban mom. This was the silent sacrifice. To build an empire that I could never publicly claim. To live a double life to protect the one life that truly mattered. The charity work had started just as organically. One of my earliest, most loyal followers was a young teenager who was battling leukemia. He would watch my streams from his hospital bed, telling me in the chat that my voice and my gameplay were a welcome distraction from the pain and the fear. When he passed away, it broke my heart. I ran my first charity stream in his honor, promising to match every donation. We raised $50,000 in one night. It was the most real, most meaningful thing I had ever done. From that day on, philanthropy became the core of Athena's identity. It was my way of turning my strange, accidental fame into something undeniably good. I swiveled in my chair and looked at the live analytics on my second monitor. The numbers were staggering. The subscribers, the donations, the loving, supportive messages from a global community. This was the ambition my in-laws accused me of lacking. This was the success they couldn't see. The irony was a constant, dull ache. They worshipped Athena. Jessica was a tier 3 subscriber to my channel, her username Jess_slays, a familiar sight in my chat logs. My mother-in-law had once spent 20 minutes showing me a clip of Athena's latest charity drive, telling me, now this is a woman who is using her platform for something important. I had just nodded and smiled, the secret a burning coal in my throat. I had built a world based on intelligence, respect, and compassion, and in doing so had created a hero for my own bullies. I had sacrificed my own public identity to protect my family, only to have that same family use my anonymous success as a weapon to bludgeon my real-life self. I looked at the framed letter from the hospital on my wall. I thought of the kids whose lives had been made a little better because of this community, because of Athena. And I knew the sacrifice was worth it. The secret was worth keeping. Their petty judgments were a small price to pay for my daughter's safety and for the good work we were doing. I put on my headset, the familiar weight a comfort. I leaned into the microphone. It was time to go to work. I had no idea that a single, kind-hearted request from the very charity I was so proud to support was about to set my two separate worlds on a collision course, and that my quiet, carefully guarded sacrifice was about to come to a very, very public end. The days following that Sunday dinner settled into a familiar, grating routine. My life was a study of jarring contrasts, a constant, whiplash-inducing transition between two vastly different worlds. By day, I was Megan, the suburban mom. I packed school lunches, I organized playdates, I drove my minivan to the grocery store, my phone buzzing with texts from my mother-in-law, Karen, with helpful links to articles like 10 Fulfilling Hobbies for Empty Nesters in Training. I would read them and feel the familiar, quiet burn of their condescension. They saw my life as a void, a placeholder for some future, yet-to-be-determined purpose. But at night, after my daughter Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, I would walk down to my basement studio, close the soundproof door, and I would become Athena. I would put on my headset, and my world would expand from the quiet suburbs to a global community of millions. I would spend hours streaming, my mind sharp, my commentary witty, my gameplay precise. I would discuss game theory and moral philosophy with PhDs in my private Discord server one moment, and then lead my guild through a complex, high-stakes raid the next. I would receive emails from major game developers offering six-figure sponsorship deals and invitations to consult on their next big project. I was a respected, powerful, and influential figure in an industry my family didn't even know existed. Then, at 2 a.m, I would turn off the monitors, take off the headset, and walk back upstairs to my life as Megan, the boring stay-at-home mom. The duality was beginning to feel less like a separation and more like a fracture. The turning point, the event that would force these two fractured worlds to collide, came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of the most mundane Megan task imaginable, folding a mountain of laundry while listening to a podcast. My personal cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it had the area code for the national office of the Dream Come True Foundation, the children's charity I had supported for years as Athena. My heart began to pound. They never called my personal number. They didn't even have it. Only my husband Sam and a very small, trusted team knew the link between Megan Miller and Athena. I answered, my voice cautious. Hello? May I speak with Megan Miller? A warm, professional voice on the other end asked. My name is Catherine Gable. I'm the executive director of the Dream Come True Foundation. It was her, the head of the foundation. I had spoken to her many times, but only ever through a voice modulator as Athena. This is she, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. Wonderful, she said. Megan, I know this call is highly unusual, and I am breaking several protocols by making it, for which I sincerely apologize. Your husband, Sam, provided us with this number after I reached out to him through your business manager. He assured me it was all right to call. We have a very special and very time-sensitive situation. I sat down on the edge of the sofa, a pile of Lily's small, colorful socks in my lap. "I'm listening," I said. "As you know, your anonymous persona, Athena, is our foundation's most significant benefactor, both financially and in terms of raising awareness. And because of that, she has become a hero to many of the children we serve." She paused, and her voice became softer, more personal. "There is a boy. His name is Leo. He's 10 years old, and he's been battling cystic fibrosis his entire life. He's a brilliant, funny, wonderful kid, but he's very tired. He's been in and out of the hospital for the past year, and his latest prognosis is not good." I closed my eyes, a familiar ache in my chest. I knew these stories. They were the reason I did what I did. "Leo is one of your biggest fans," she continued. "He watches every one of Athena's streams from his hospital bed. He says she's smart and funny and that she's strong enough to beat any monster in any game. He says she makes him feel strong." When we asked him what his one ultimate dream come true wish would be, he didn't ask to go to Disneyland. He didn't ask to meet a movie star. He just said, "I want to meet Athena. I just want to talk to her." The laundry in my lap blurred as my eyes filled with tears.
"Normally," Catherine said, her voice full of a gentle urgency, "we would respect your anonymity completely. But Leo's doctors say he doesn't have much time. We felt we had to at least ask. I know it's an impossible request, but would there be any way for you, for Athena, to grant this one child's wish?" The question hung in the air, a question that carried the weight of a young boy's final dream. My entire carefully constructed world, the thick wall I had built between my two lives, began to tremble. My instinct as Athena, the philanthropist, the hero to these kids, screamed, "Yes, of course yes, whatever it takes." But my instinct as Megan, the mother who had built that wall to protect her own child from the dangers of the internet, screamed, "No, it's too risky, you can't." I thought of what a single photograph, a single leak of my name could do. The harassment, the doxing, the loss of the precious, normal life I had fought so hard to give my daughter. But then I thought of Leo, alone in his hospital room, finding strength in the voice of a stranger on the internet. How could I, in the name of protecting my own child, deny a dying child his last wish? "I need to make a call," I whispered to Catherine. "Can I call you back in 5 minutes?" "Of course," she said, her voice full of understanding. I immediately called Sam. I explained the situation, my voice cracking. He was quiet on the other end, and I knew he was weighing the same risks I was. His one wish, Sam, his only wish is to meet me. My husband, my wonderful, supportive husband, took a deep breath. "Meg," he said, his voice firm and full of a love that was my true anchor, "there's no decision to make here. We can't say no to this kid. We just can't. You have to do it. We'll figure out the rest. We'll make it safe. I'll be right there with you." I hung up, my heart filled with a terrifying, beautiful resolve. I called Catherine back. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'll do it, but I have conditions." I laid them out. The visit had to be absolutely 100% private. No press, no social media, no exceptions. It had to be at my home, where I could control the environment. Only the foundation representative and the boy and his parents could come. Catherine agreed to everything without hesitation. "When would be a good time for you, Megan?" she asked. I looked at my calendar. The week was a blur of appointments and school events. The only free time I had was the upcoming Saturday afternoon.
Saturday at 2 p.m. would be perfect, I said. That's wonderful, she said, relief flooding her voice. I will make the arrangements. Megan, thank you. You have no idea what this will mean to him. After we hung up, I stood in my quiet, sunlit living room, a feeling of profound, heart-pounding dread and purpose washing over me. I had made the right choice. The only choice. Then, a horrifying realization dawned on me. I looked at the calendar on the wall again. Saturday afternoon. My mind had been so focused on Leo that I had completely forgotten. Saturday afternoon was the day of our annual family barbecue, the one I was hosting, the one my mother-in-law and Jessica were coming to. The two worlds I had fought so hard to keep separate were not just going to collide, they were going to explode, right here in my own backyard. The morning of the barbecue arrived with a sky of brilliant, unnerving blue. The day was beautiful, the kind of perfect summer Saturday that should have been filled with easy joy, but for me it was shrouded in a thick fog of anxiety. Every moment felt like a countdown. Every tick of the clock was 1 second closer to the inevitable collision I had set in motion. I went through the motions of preparing for the party in a daze, my hands chopping vegetables for a salad while my mind raced with 1,000 disastrous scenarios.
Sam was my rock. He saw the tremor in my hands as I arranged platters, the distant, haunted look in my eyes. "Hey," he said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "Whatever happens today, we'll handle it together. Just remember why you're doing this. Today isn't about them. It's about that kid. That's all that matters." His words were a lifeline, a reminder of the true purpose of this terrifying day. He was right. This wasn't about my family's drama. It was about a little boy's dream. My family arrived precisely on time, armed with cheap bottles of wine and their usual passive-aggressive commentary. My mother-in-law, Karen, immediately began rearranging the serving dishes on the buffet table, clucking her tongue and murmuring, "No, no, dear, the coleslaw should never be next to the hot dishes. It will get warm." My sister-in-law, Jessica, was already on her phone, likely live-streaming her arrival to her small legion of followers. "Hanging at my bros for a super chill family barbecue, #family vibes, #Saturday," she narrated to her screen, before turning to me with a saccharine smile. "This is cute, Megan. Very domestic." I just smiled and nodded, my mind a million miles away. I was a ghost at my own party, a hostess performing a role, while my true self was braced for impact. I flipped burgers on the grill. I refilled bowls of chips. I listened to my father-in-law complain about his golf game. And all the while, I was watching the clock on the wall, the hands seeming to move with an agonizing slowness towards 2 o'clock. And then, it happened. Precisely at 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the cheerful din of the party. A sudden, expectant silence fell over the backyard. Everyone turned to look at me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sam gave me a small, supportive nod from across the lawn. "I'll get it," he called out, and disappeared into the house. I held my breath. I could hear the murmur of voices from the front of the house, and then Sam reappeared at the back patio door. Behind him stood a woman with kind eyes and a professional smile, and holding her hand was a small, pale boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He was thin and frail, and he clutched a worn, custom-printed Athena mousepad to his chest like a holy relic. His eyes, large and luminous in his small face, scanned the backyard with a look of nervous, almost sacred awe. Sam led them onto the patio. The woman stepped forward. "Hello, everyone," she said, her voice warm and clear. "My apologies for the intrusion. My name is Catherine Gable, and I'm the director of the Dream Come True Foundation." My family stared, their faces a mixture of confusion and intrigue. "We are here today on behalf of this very brave young man, Leo," she continued, gesturing to the boy beside her. "Leo is one of our kids, and his one heartfelt wish was to meet his
personal hero. The mood in the backyard shifted instantly. A celebrity here? My sister-in-law, Jessica, nearly vibrated with excitement. This was the kind of content her social media feed craved. "Oh my God," she squealed, fumbling for her phone. "A celebrity? Who is it? Who's here?" She looked at Catherine, her eyes wide with a thirsty, starstruck eagerness. "Is it Athena, the streamer? I am literally her biggest fan. Is she in the neighborhood?" Catherine Gable gave a gentle, knowing smile. "Yes, actually," she said, her eyes flickering towards me for a fraction of a second. "His hero is Athena." But before she could say another word, before she could make the formal introduction, it happened. The boy, Leo, who had been scanning the crowd with a look of intense concentration, finally saw me. I was standing by the grill, frozen, my hands clutching a pair of barbecue tongs. My heart stopped in my chest.
His face, which had been so pale and nervous, broke open into the most radiant, beautiful smile I had ever seen. The awe in his eyes intensified, and he let out a small, breathless gasp. He let go of Catherine's hand. And then he ran. He ran across the perfectly manicured lawn, his small legs carrying him with a speed I wouldn't have thought possible. He ran past my stunned father-in-law. He ran past my mother-in-law, her mouth agape. He ran past my sister-in-law, Jessica, who stood there with her phone held up, ready to capture a selfie with a hero she had just realized she had spent years trying to destroy. He didn't stop until he reached me. He threw his small, frail arms around my legs, burying his face in my side, clutching my jeans like he would never let go. And his voice, full of a pure, unadulterated joy and a reverence that silenced the entire world, rang out across the silent, shocked backyard. "Athena!" he cried, his voice muffled by my shirt. "It's really you! I can't believe it! It's really you!" The universe paused. The birds stopped chirping. The music from the portable speaker seemed to die. The only sound was the soft, happy sob from the little boy clinging to my legs. I looked over his head at my family. At my mother-in-law, her face a frozen mask of absolute, uncomprehending horror, and at my sister-in-law, her phone still held aloft, her jaw slack, her eyes wide with the sickening, world-shattering realization that the boring, ambitionless stay-at-home mom she had so gleefully mocked and the brilliant, powerful hero she so desperately idolized were, and always had been, the exact same person. Ignoring all of them, ignoring the wreckage of their small, judgmental world, I knelt down. I gently pried the barbecue tongs from my white-knuckled grip, letting them clatter forgotten onto the grass. And I wrapped my arms around the little boy, hugging him back with all the strength I had. "Hi, Leo," I whispered, my own voice thick with tears. "It's so, so good to finally meet you." The sound of my name, or rather my other name, shouted with such pure, unadulterated joy by the little boy now clinging to my legs, seemed to create a ripple in time. The entire backyard, with its cheerful party atmosphere, was frozen in a state of absolute, stunned silence. My sister-in-law, Jessica, stood motionless, her phone held aloft, her jaw slack, her eyes wide with the sickening, world-shattering realization that the boring, ambitionless stay-at-home mom she had so gleefully mocked and the brilliant, powerful hero she so desperately idolized were, and always had been, the exact same person. Ignoring all of them, ignoring the wreckage of their small, judgmental world, I knelt down. I gently pried the barbecue tongs from my white-knuckled grip, letting them clatter forgotten onto the grass. And I wrapped my arms around the little boy, hugging him back with all the strength I had. "Hi, Leo," I whispered, my own voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It's so good to finally meet you. I'm the one who's a fan of you. I've heard all about how brave you are. His eyes, when he looked up at me, were like two giant luminous stars. You're real, he breathed, as if confirming a miracle. I'm real, I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Come on, there's something I want to show you. Leaving my entire family frozen in their tableau of silent horror, I took Leo's small hand in mine, gave my husband Sam a look that said, "I've got this," and led the small procession, Leo, his parents, and the quietly smiling Mrs. Gable from the foundation, into my house and down the stairs to my basement studio.
The moment Leo saw the room, with its glowing monitors and professional equipment, he gasped. It was like I had brought him to the command deck of the Starship Enterprise. His reverence was a sacred thing. I sat him down in my gaming chair, which was far too big for him, and let him try on my headset. I showed him how I managed my streams, the complex software I used, and even let him play a level of his favorite co-op game with me. For the next hour, the outside world ceased to exist. There was no family drama, no shocking reveal. There was only the quiet, happy joy of making a little boy's dream come true. He told me about his favorite moments from my streams, and I told him about the secret Easter eggs I had hidden in certain games. We were just two people, connecting over a shared love. It was the most real, most authentic moment I had experienced in months. When Mrs. Gable finally, gently, said it was time to go, Leo hugged me with a strength that belied his frail frame. "Thank you, Athena," he whispered. "This was the best day of my entire life." As they left, his parents looked at me with tears in their eyes, their gratitude a palpable force. When I finally returned to the backyard, the party was effectively over. The other guests had already left, sensing a deep, irreparable family schism they wanted no part of. All that remained were my in-laws and my parents, sitting in a miserable, silent circle on the patio. The half-eaten burgers were cold on their plates, the cheerful music was gone. All the air had been sucked out of the day. They all looked up as I approached. It was Jessica who spoke first. Her voice was a small, broken thing I had never heard from her before. You're really her? Athena?" I just nodded, taking a seat next to my husband. My in-laws, Karen, tried to salvage the situation with the only tool she had, manipulation. "Well," she began, forcing a brittle smile, "why on earth didn't you tell us, Megan? We had no idea. We would have been so supportive. We could have helped you." A slow, cold anger, the anger of 1,000 tiny cuts, finally rose in me. But my voice, when I spoke, was quiet and steady. "Helped me?" I asked, looking directly at her. "Supported me? Karen, for the last 5 years, you have done nothing but look at me with pity and disappointment. You have called me ambitionless. You have called my life's work, raising my daughter, as simple." Then I turned to my sister-in-law, who was now staring at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. "And you, Jessica?" I said, my voice still quiet but with an edge of steel. "You held up a fantasy version of me, a persona, as a weapon to make me feel small in my own life. You worshipped an idea while you belittled the real person right in front of you. You didn't want to support me. You just wanted to be adjacent to fame. The truth is, you didn't know me because you never, ever bothered to try." The silence that followed was heavy and final. There was nothing left to say. They knew I was right. Their judgment, their snobbery, their years of condescension had been laid bare for what it was, a reflection of their own shallow values. The family dinners did not stop, but they were never the same. They are now quiet, strained affairs. Jessica barely speaks to me. Karen tries too hard asking me awkward questions about my streaming career with a fawning, fearful respect that is almost as insulting as your previous pity.
The dynamic has been permanently broken, and nothing can ever truly repair it.
But my vindication didn't come from their shame or their awkward silence. It came a few weeks later in an email from the Dream Come True Foundation. It was a short video message from Leo. He was back in the hospital, but he was smiling, his face full of a light I hadn't seen at the party. He was holding up the mouse pad I had signed for him. "Hi, Athena," he said. "The doctors say I'm doing better. They said my spirits are high. That's because of you. Thank you for being my hero." I sat there in my basement studio, and I cried. Not tears of sadness or anger, but tears of profound, quiet joy. The world my family had tried to make small was, in fact, vast and full of a meaning they could never understand. My greatest success was not the number of my followers or the money I had raised. It was the smile on that little boy's face. My vindication was not improving them wrong. It was improving to myself that the part of me they dismissed as boring, my kindness, my compassion, my desire to connect was, and always had been, my true superpower. A beautiful and heartwarming story about the power of kindness and the surprise of a secret identity. What do you think of the way Megan's secret was revealed? Let us know your thoughts on this incredible story in the comments below. If you were touched by this story of wholesome vindication, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more powerful daily stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. My grandfather smiled proudly at me from across the dinner table and asked about my new car. I looked at him, confused, and told him the truth. I didn't have a car. I took the last bus home from my second job every night, a ride that often left me shaking with fear. And across the table, my mother, Sharon, who had been listening with a serene, knowing smile on her face, suddenly dropped her fork. The clatter of silver on porcelain was the only sound in the world. It was the sound of a lie shattering. But before the lie shattered, it had to be built, and my mother was a master architect. My life was a repeating loop of exhaustion. My days were a blur of aching feet and the smell of stale coffee. I worked 2 jobs. From 9 to 4, I was a receptionist at a small, struggling dental office where I spent my day scheduling appointments and dealing with angry insurance companies. From 5 to 11, I was a waitress at the Greasy Spoon, a classic, run-down diner where the tips were meager and the customers were often rude. The work was grueling, mind-numbing, and soul-crushing, but it was necessary. I was saving every single spare dollar for a dream that felt both laughably simple and impossibly out of reach: a reliable, used car. My current reality was the 10:45 p.m. city bus. It was the last bus of the night, a rolling, rattling metal box filled with the city's ghosts. I would sit, my body thrumming with the fatigue of a 16-hour workday, and pray for my stop to come quickly. The ride was a nightly exercise in quiet terror. I would clutch my purse, my keys woven through my fingers like a makeshift weapon, and avoid making eye contact with anyone. A car wasn't a luxury for me. It was a lifeline. It was safety. It was dignity. It was the finish line of a marathon I felt like I had been running my entire life. The finish line, however, kept moving further away, and the reason for that was my mother. I remember a phone call from her just last week. I was in the small, cramped room I rented, counting the crumpled dollar bills from my tips that evening. $73. A good night. I was just about to tuck it into the envelope marked Car Fund when my phone rang. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. "Leah, honey," she began, her voice already thick with a manufactured, theatrical despair. "I am so sorry to bother you. I know how hard you work, but the electric bill came and it's a catastrophe. I don't know how we're going to manage this month. Your grandfather, bless his heart, sends what he can, but it just doesn't stretch. Don't you worry about me, though. I'll be fine. I'll just eat less." The guilt was a familiar, physical thing, a hook in my gut that she knew exactly how to twist. I looked at the $73 on my bed, the physical representation of 8 hours of serving greasy burgers and endless coffee refills. It was another small step towards my car, towards my safety. But my mother's performance was, as always, flawless. I pictured her sitting alone in the dark to save on electricity. I said, "It's okay, Mom," my voice heavy with the resignation I knew all too well. "I had a good night. I'll transfer you some money right now." "Oh, would you, sweetie?" she had replied, her voice instantly brightening. "You are such a good daughter, a true lifesaver. I don't know what I would do without you." I knew what she would do. She would be fine. But I sent the money anyway. The car fund was a little lighter, and the finish line was a little further away.
This was our dynamic, a toxic dance of her feigned helplessness and my conditioned sense of duty. It was so different from my relationship with my grandfather. Walter was my rock. He was a retired pipefitter who lived a simple, modest life, but his heart was a wellspring of generosity. He was the only one who seemed to see me, who asked about my dreams, who told me he was proud of my work ethic. "You're a good kid, Leah," he had told me on the phone just a few days ago. "You work harder than anyone I know. You deserve some good things to happen to you." I had basked in the warmth of his praise, but I never told him the full truth. I never told him that I was giving his daughter, my mother, a significant portion of my earnings. I didn't want to worry him. I didn't want to cause a fight between them. I was protecting him from the truth of who his daughter really was. It was my silent sacrifice, another burden I carried to keep the fragile peace. And so I arrived at my mother's house for our weekly Sunday dinner, exhausted but ready to play my part. My grandfather was already there, his face lighting up when he saw me. My mother greeted me with a hug that felt both performative and possessive. She had on a new silk blouse I had never seen before. She spent the first 20 minutes of dinner complaining about the rising cost of groceries, all while serving a lavish pot roast that must have cost a fortune. I just smiled and nodded, my mind a million miles away, already calculating how many tables I'd have to wait on to make up for the money I had given her. I had no idea that my life was about to change forever between the main course and the dessert. The pot roast at my mother's Sunday dinners was always a little too dry, but I dutifully ate every bite, offering compliments I didn't mean. "This is delicious, Mom," I'd say, and she would beam, accepting the praise as her rightful due. These dinners were a performance, and I had been playing my part for so long, I sometimes forgot where the character of the grateful, struggling daughter ended and my own true self began. The sacrifice I was making wasn't just the money I gave her. It was the truth of my own life, which I kept hidden, so as not to disrupt the fragile ecosystem of her carefully constructed narrative of victimhood. I sat there, listening to her complain about the price of beef, a familiar ache settling into my bones. My feet throbbed from the double shift I had worked the day before. I thought about the cash in my wallet, the meager tips from yesterday that I had already mentally earmarked for her after she had called me that morning, sighing about an unexpected plumbing bill. My life was a relentless cycle of earning and giving, a transfer of my own hard-won future into the black hole of her present. My mind drifted back to a particularly painful memory from last winter. I had been saving for months a secret, secondary fund for a new winter coat, as my old one had a broken zipper and thinning insulation. I had finally saved up $150, enough for something decent that would last me for years. I was planning to go shopping the next day. That night, my mother had called me sobbing. Her ancient water heater had broken, she had wailed, and the repairman needed $300 in cash up front, money she simply didn't have.
I'll just have to take cold showers, I suppose, in the middle of winter. Don't you worry about me."
The guilt had been immediate and overwhelming. I had gone to the ATM, taken out my entire coat fund, and driven it over to her apartment. She had hugged me, calling me her savior, her angel. A week later, I saw a picture she posted on social media. She was at a fancy spa resort with 2 of her friends, a much-needed girls' weekend. In the photo, she was wearing a brand-new, luxurious-looking cashmere sweater. When I had cautiously asked about it, she had waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, this old thing? I found it on a clearance rack for a steal. You know how frugal I am." That was the pattern. A crisis, a bailout, and a subsequent, inexplicable luxury purchase that I was meant to ignore. I endured it because I loved her, or at least I loved the idea of the mother I wished she was. And I did it to protect my grandfather. The thought of him knowing the true nature of his daughter's financial life, of her constant manipulation of me, would have broken his generous, trusting heart. So I played my part, the dutiful daughter helping her struggling mother. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that my mother was playing a far more complex and devastating game. She wasn't just taking from me, she was taking for me, and keeping it all. I can see it so clearly now, a memory that wasn't mine, but one I've pieced together. I can picture my grandfather, Walter, in his cozy living room a year ago, talking to my mother on the phone. He's worried about me. He knows I work late, and he hates the idea of me taking the bus alone at night. "Sharon," he says, his voice full of gentle concern, "I want to help Leah get a car. It's a matter of safety. I'm going to send you an extra $200 every single month on top of what I already send you for your bills. This extra is just for her. You put it in a safe place. Call it Leah's car fund. Don't tell her it's from me. You know how proud she is. Just tell her it's a little family fund we're all contributing to." And I can hear my mother's voice on the other end, a symphony of false gratitude. "Oh, Dad, that is the most generous thing I have ever heard. She will be so thrilled. Thank you, thank you. You are the best father a girl could ask for." The deception was twofold and brilliant in its cruelty. To me, she painted a picture of herself as a struggling woman barely getting by on her father's meager help, thus guilting me into giving her my own money. To my grandfather, she painted a picture of me as a proud, secretive, and slightly ungrateful daughter, which explained why I never personally thanked him for the car fund I didn't even know existed. "How is the fund coming along?" he would ask her. "Oh, she's so grateful, Dad," my mother would lie smoothly. "But you know, Leah, so independent. She says she wants to save most of it herself. She's very private about it, but she's getting close. I can feel it." My secret weapon, the thing that would eventually unravel this entire web of lies, was something I didn't even know I possessed. It was my own simple, devastating honesty. My complete and total ignorance of the grand financial plan that had been orchestrated in my name. I was the only person at that dinner table who didn't know about the car fund. My mother knew the truth of her theft. My grandfather knew the truth of his generosity. And I, the supposed beneficiary of it all, knew only the exhaustion in my bones and the dwindling balance of my own savings account. I came back to the present with a start as my mother laughed at something my grandfather said. I looked at him, at his kind, loving face, and my heart ached with love so pure it was almost painful. He was the one true, uncomplicated good thing in my life. I wished, in that moment, that he could see how hard I was really working, how much I was struggling. I wished he could see the truth.
I had no idea that my wish was about to come true in the most spectacular and catastrophic way possible. I thought it was just another quiet, frustrating Sunday dinner. I had no idea my grandfather was about to pick up his water glass, clear his throat, and detonate a truth bomb that would change all of our lives forever.
The Sunday dinner at my mother's apartment was a masterclass in her particular brand of performance art. The small dining table was set with her best china, the plates she only used when my grandfather was visiting. The pot roast was, as always, slightly dry, but she presented it as if it were a Michelin-starred creation. She fluttered around my grandfather, Walter, refilling his glass, laughing a little too loudly at his familiar old jokes, playing the part of the doting, attentive daughter to perfection. I sat through it all, a quiet observer. I was exhausted. The night before, I had worked a grueling double shift at the diner, staying until we closed at 1 a.m., and then caught the last bus home, arriving at my small rented room well after 2. But I was here, smiling and nodding, because this was Sunday, and on Sunday, we performed for Grandpa. We pretended we were a normal, happy, functional family. "I don't know how you do it all, Sharon," my grandfather said, shaking his head in admiration as my mother served him a slice of roast. "Working so hard, keeping this place so lovely. You're a wonder." My mother let out a theatrical, martyred sigh. "Oh, you know, Dad, it's a struggle. The bills just never seem to stop. I had a plumbing emergency just last week, an absolute nightmare. But we manage. We always do." She glanced at me, a silent, pointed reminder of the $73 in tips I had transferred to her account to help with this emergency. I focused on cutting my pot roast into unnecessarily small pieces, my eyes fixed on my plate. I felt the familiar weight of her unspoken expectations, the guilt, the obligation. It was a constant low-grade hum beneath the surface of all our interactions. My grandfather looked at me, his eyes full of a warm, genuine pride that was a stark contrast to my mother's performative drama. "And you, Leah," he said, "your mother tells me you're working so hard, double shifts, saving up. That's my girl, the Pendleton work ethic. You get that from me." "I'm trying, Grandpa." I offered him a small, genuine smile. His approval was the one true, uncomplicated thing in my life. He winked at my mother over my head, a secret, conspiratorial gesture that I didn't understand. He said, "Well, I have a feeling all that hard work is about to pay off in a big way, a very big way." My mother, catching his wink, smiled back, a serene, beatific look on her face. She thought he was just being a proud grandfather. She had no idea she was winking back at the executioner of her own long-running deception. She thought they were sharing a secret about me. And in a way, they were. They just had 2 completely different versions of it. After the dinner plates were cleared, my mother brought out a store-bought apple pie for dessert. As she was cutting the slices, my grandfather gently tapped his water glass with his spoon. The sound was soft, but it immediately commanded the room's attention. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," he began, a broad, happy smile spreading across his face. He slowly, with the creak of old joints, got to his feet. He held his water glass aloft. "I'm not much for speeches," he said, his eyes twinkling, "but I have something on my heart tonight. I've been thinking a lot about legacy, about what we build in this life and what we pass on. For me, the most important legacy is not money or property. It's character. It's the value of hard work, of independence, of earning your own way in the world." He turned his gaze fully on me, and my heart swelled with love for him. His eyes were so full of pride it was almost overwhelming. "And I have never seen that spirit more alive than in my granddaughter Leah," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. She works harder than anyone I know. She doesn't complain. She doesn't make excuses. She just puts her head down and does the work. She has faced challenges, but she has done it with a grace and a quiet strength that makes this old man prouder than you can possibly imagine. I could feel my face flushing, a mixture of embarrassment and a deep, profound happiness. My mother was beaming, nodding along as if his words were a testament to her own good parenting. "And it brings me more joy than I can say," my grandfather went on, his smile growing even wider, "to see that quiet strength and hard work finally pay off, to see her achieve a dream she has worked so hard for, which is why I would like to propose a toast." He raised his glass high, his eyes locked on mine, radiating pure, undiluted love. "To my wonderful granddaughter, Leah," he declared, his voice ringing with celebratory joy, "and to her brand new car. I am so proud that the little car fund we all built together finally got you there." He paused, his face a picture of happy expectation. The entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. The words hung in the air, nonsensical and bizarre, completely disconnected from the reality of my life. New car? Car fund? The words didn't make sense. It was like he was speaking a foreign language. I looked at him, at his beaming, expectant face, and then my eyes instinctively darted to my mother. The serene, proud smile on her face had vanished. It had been replaced by a brittle, frozen mask of pure, abject panic. Her face, which had been flushed with a happy, social warmth, was now a pale, waxy white. She was staring at me, her eyes wide, with a silent, desperate plea. Don't you dare." But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking back at my grandfather, the man I loved, the man who was looking at me with such hope and pride. And he had asked me a simple, direct question. My mind was a screaming chaos, a whirlwind of confusion and a dawning, sickening sense of dread. The two realities, the one my grandfather believed and the one I was living, were crashing together right here at this dinner table. And I was standing at the epicenter. He was waiting for an answer, and the only thing I had to give him was the truth. The dining room was quiet for a moment. The only sounds, the gentle clinking of silverware on my mother's best china and the low, contented hum of my grandfather's praise. The warmth of his words was a balm on my weary soul. For a moment, sitting there in the candlelight, I could almost believe in the illusion my mother had so carefully crafted. The illusion that we were a normal, happy family, celebrating the quiet successes of one of its own. My mother, Sharon, was beaming, nodding along as if his words were a testament to her own good parenting. She was so confident in her web of lies, so secure in her role as the long-suffering matriarch, that she couldn't see the precipice she was about to be pushed over. My grandfather, Walter, raised his glass high, his eyes watery with age and affection, locked on mine. "To my wonderful granddaughter, Leah," he declared, his voice ringing with pure, undiluted love. "And to her brand new car. I am so proud that the little car fund we all built together finally got you there." He paused, his face a picture of happy expectation. The entire world seemed to tilt on its axis.
The words hung in the air, nonsensical and bizarre, completely disconnected from the reality of my life. "New car? Car fund? Tell us all about it, honey," he boomed, his face a picture of pure joy. "What did you get?" The question, so full of love and happy expectation, landed on me with the force of a physical blow. A profound, dizzying confusion washed over me. I looked at my grandfather's beaming face, and then my eyes instinctively darted across the table to my mother. The change in her was instantaneous and horrifying. The serene, proud smile she had been wearing just a second before was gone, vanished as if it had never been. In its place was a brittle, frozen mask of pure, abject panic.
Her face, which had been flushed with a happy social warmth, was now a pale, waxy white. Her eyes were wide, and in their depths I saw a single, silent, desperate plea. Lie. Lie for me. Save me. But I couldn't. I didn't even know what the lie was supposed to be. All I had was the truth. I turned my confused gaze back to my grandfather. "A car?" I asked, my voice a small, bewildered whisper that seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. "Grandpa, what car? I don't have a car." I saw the proud smile on his face begin to falter, his brow furrowing into confusion. "I take the 10:45 bus home from the diner every night," I continued, my voice gaining a little strength as I tried to explain my own reality to make sense of his. "My savings are actually a little low this month. I've been trying to help Mom out. I gave her my tips from last week to help with that plumbing bill she had." As I spoke these simple, honest words, a small dramatic movement happened across the table. My mother, in a desperate attempt to project an air of normalcy, had been in the middle of lifting a forkful of apple pie to her lips. Her hand was trembling violently. And as I said the words, "help Mom with a plumbing bill," her control shattered. Her fingers went slack. The fork fell. It fell with a clatter that was loud and sharp as a gunshot in the silent room. Silver hit china with a piercing clink. The sound of a lie being exposed, of a performance ending in catastrophic failure. My mother didn't even notice it. She was staring at her plate, her face a crumbling mask of guilt and terror. The mask was gone. The loving, concerned mother had vanished. In her place sat a thief, a cornered, terrified thief. My grandfather followed my gaze to the fallen fork, then to his daughter's horrified, ashen face. He looked back at me, at my own tired, earnest confusion, and I could see it happening in his eyes. I could see the pieces of the puzzle, the two separate realities he had been living in, finally, horribly, slamming together in his mind. The extra money he sent every month for a car I'd never seen, the tip money I had been giving my mother out of my own meager earnings, the lies she must have told him about my pride and ingratitude, it all connected, forming a single, ugly, and undeniable picture of his own daughter's profound deception. The look of pride on his face was replaced by a look of such deep, wounded disappointment that it broke my heart. And then that disappointment cooled, hardening into a cold, quiet fury I had never seen him before. He ignored my mother completely. He spoke to me, his voice low and shaking with controlled rage. He said to me, his eyes boring into mine, "Leah, honey, tell me again. You take the bus home from the diner every night?" "Yes, Grandpa." "And you have been giving your mother the money you earned from your tips?" "Yes, Grandpa, to help her with the bills."
He finally turned his cold, furious gaze upon his daughter. He did not yell. He did not scream. His voice was a low, dangerous whisper that was far more terrifying. "Sharon," he said, his voice like ice, "for the past 12 months, I have sent you a separate check for $200 every single month. In the memo line of every single one of those checks, I have written the words, 'Leah's Car Fund.'" He leaned forward, his old hands flat on the table. "My granddaughter has been working herself to the bone, giving you the money off her own tired feet because she thought you were destitute. Now, you will look at me, and you will tell me, where is the money?" My mother just sat there, frozen, the fallen fork a silver accusation on her plate. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trapped. She was exposed. There were no more lies to tell. There was nowhere left to hide. My grandfather's final question, "Where is the money?" hung in the silent dining room like a judgment. It was a simple question, but it held the weight of a lifetime of lies, a year of stolen dreams.
My mother, Sharon, stared at him, her face a crumbling mask of utter devastation. The web she had so carefully woven for years had just been torn to shreds by a single, honest sentence from her own daughter. She opened her mouth, a desperate, guttural sound escaping her lips. I was saving it for her, she stammered, the lie thin and pathetic. In a special account. I was waiting for the interest to accumulate for the right time. The right time? My grandfather repeated, his voice dangerously soft. The right time was every single night for the past year that my granddaughter stood at a bus stop alone in the dark because she couldn't afford the car you were stealing from her. The right time was every single time she handed you her hard-earned tip money because you lied to her about being destitute. He stood up from his chair, his old body straight and rigid with a righteous fury. He looked at his daughter, the woman he had raised and supported, and I saw the love in his eyes curdle into a deep, profound sorrow and disgust. I have spent my life working to provide for my family. I thought I was helping you. Instead, I was funding your greed and enabling you to steal from your own child. There is nothing more to say. He turned his back on her then. It was a simple gesture, but it was an act of finality, of a door being closed forever. He walked around the table to me, his face a mask of grief. "Come, Leah," he said softly, placing a trembling hand on my shoulder. "Let's go home." I stood up, and together we walked out of my mother's apartment, leaving her alone amidst the ruins of her perfect dinner party, a solitary figure in the wreckage of her own making. We didn't look back. The days that followed were a quiet, painful unraveling. The phone calls, when they came, were not from my grandfather. They were from my mother. Her initial messages were a frantic barrage of accusations, blaming me for turning her father against her and destroying the family. Then, when I didn't respond, the tone shifted to desperate, manipulative pleading, full of tearful apologies that were not for her actions, but for the consequences she was now facing. I listened to one voicemail where she sobbed about an overdue bill, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty sadness for the mother I wished I had, and a grim resolve to protect myself from the one I actually did. I blocked her number.
A week later, my grandfather called me. His voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion in it. "Leah," he said, "I've made some arrangements. The monthly support I was sending to your mother has been terminated. She is a grown woman. It is long past time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet. He paused. "My help, from now on, goes where it is needed and where it is appreciated. It goes to you directly. This is how it should have been all along." And so our new life began, a life built on a foundation of brutal but clean honesty. We spent more time together than ever before, our bond forged stronger in the fire of my mother's betrayal. We talked for hours, filling in the gaps that her lies had created, sharing truths we had both been too scared to speak. The following Saturday, he took me to a car dealership. Not a flashy one, but a large, reputable lot for certified used cars. "A brand new car loses half its value the second you drive it away," he said with a practical smile. "A good, solid 3-year-old car is the smart choice." We spent the afternoon test-driving sensible sedans and practical SUVs. I found a beautiful dark blue hatchback, a car that was safe, reliable, and perfect for me. At the finance desk, my grandfather wrote a check for the full down payment. It was a generous amount, far more than the total he had sent to my mother for the car fund. He then slid the final paperwork and the pen over to me. "You sign," he said, his eyes twinkling.
You're the one building your future. As I signed my name, my hand was steady. This was real. This was mine. It wasn't a gift born of a lie. It was a partnership born from the truth. That night, for the first time, I drove myself home from my late shift at the diner. I didn't have to check the bus schedule. I didn't have to stand on a dark, lonely corner, my keys woven through my fingers. I just walked out into the cool night air and got into my own car. As I drove through the quiet, sleeping streets, the feeling of the wheel in my hands was the feeling of freedom. I thought about the money. The money my mother had stolen was never really the point. The real theft was the trust she had broken, the love she had manipulated. My vindication wasn't in her financial ruin. It was in this quiet moment, this simple, profound act of driving myself home safe and sound. The car wasn't a luxury. It was a tool of my independence, an independence I had been working for my entire life, and one that was finally made possible by a love that was direct, honest, and true. A truly heartbreaking story of betrayal, but one with a beautiful, empowering resolution. What do you think of the way the grandfather's love finally reached his granddaughter? Let us know your thoughts on this complex family drama in the comments below. If you were touched by this story of justice and healing, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more powerful daily stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.